Welcome to the About Sex podcast, where we discuss
Jesus.
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit, but not normally.
Not normally.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Josh, and with me, as always, is my lovely wife, Angela Skirtu. Tell us who you are, Angela.
I'm a licensed marriage therapist and an ASEX certified sex therapist. And today our guest is Sally Hunt. And
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
A little brief bio about Sally. She's also known as the Passionate Atheist, and she is an activist who advocates for comprehensive sex education, sex positivity, and the separation of church and state. Sally founded the group Expose Thrive, which successfully got Thrive's best choice, abstinence-only, shame-based, and fear-based program removed from 16 local public school districts. We'll stop there, but you have also a lot of awesome accomplishments.
We'll read the last section.
Oh, you want the last section too? Okay, because we kind of keep it short. She also has a master's in counseling, 6 years experience as a school counselor, and will be entering a PhD program in the fall.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Hey, Sally.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, well, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, yeah. Who are you?
Who are you and why are you important?
Oh, well, I don't know about that. I'm not making that claim.
I am.
But, well, I won't stop you if you wanted to, but I won't. But, yeah, no, I mean, I am just someone who has spoken out for what is right. And I have seen things that are wrong and harmful, and I have simply spoken out against them, such as you mentioned, the abstinence only, shame-based, fear-based, medically inaccurate, quote-unquote sex ed, which is not real sex ed, but this abstinence-only stuff.
It's avoid sex education.
Exactly. It's really sexual morality opinions.
Right.
Opinions by specific religious fundamentalists who were allowed in public schools promoting their biased religious and political agenda. But anyway, so yeah, that's the organization Thrive with Best Choice program. And so I started Expose Thrive, and we just exposed them and exactly who they are and what they were teaching. And we spoke out at public school districts and got them removed from 16 public school districts.
Awesome.
So I've done a lot of that. And as you mentioned, I speak out a lot for the separation of church and state.
Right.
And I am an open atheist.
Recently, you were on Fox News. How did that start? So first, there was something that happened in Wentzville. How did that start?
Yeah, tell us the story.
What was the reason that you were there?
Yeah, well, so in Wentzville, nearby, about 25 minutes away from where I live in Maryland Heights, somebody had brought to my attention that their brand new city hall has a very large display that says "In God We Trust" right in the center of the dais, where the mayor and the board of aldermen do their work, and right where everybody comes to the meetings, to the board of aldermen meetings.
It's a public forum.
So,
this is a public place.
Exactly. Public government building, paid for with tax dollars and all of that. And so it's huge. In God We Trust, right in your face. And so, someone sent me this picture of it because they knew, they themselves, this person, this man lives in Wentzville.
Right.
He is also an atheist who saw how wrong this was to say "In God We Trust." He does not believe in a God, so he cannot trust in a God.
Yeah.
The statement is a lie. But he himself,
for
many people, and so, but he himself, living in a very conservative, very Christian area, there's a lot of backlash, hostility, discrimination against people who openly come out as atheists and who openly oppose government displays like this of religion and of Christianity. So he himself was afraid to speak out publicly, but he knew that I would be perfectly willing to do so.
He knew that you were perfectly happy to speak out publicly.
Yeah.
Sally's willing to talk publicly.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I want to talk about this too, because so first of all, as a therapist, I respect everyone's values. But one of the
As
challenges...
a man who is not a therapist, I do not respect anybody's values.
I appreciate that.
Want
That's
to clarify
honest.
that.
But why this is important is that it's the separation of church and state. Government and school is meant to try and give the facts and try to represent the whole of the population, regardless of what your beliefs are. But putting a sign like that is definitely not a separation of that church and state. So anybody who doesn't fall into that Christian value system sort of feels alienated, or it's not okay for them to be themselves.
Right, exactly. It is the government promoting a preference for for people who believe in a God, and really specifically for Christians. It's
Right.
definitely about Christianity.
Because it doesn't say in Allah we trust.
Of
Right.
course, exactly. I mean, it's abundantly clear. It's Christianity. I mean, all of the legislators in Wentzville are, Christian. They believe in Jesus. That's,
And it's okay.
and that's okay. They have that right.
Sure.
But to use the government to promote that religious belief it is absolutely promoting a preference for a certain religion for certain people, and it is promoting discrimination against other people. And the government is supposed to represent everyone.
Right.
It's equality under the
And
law.
that's actually what makes our country such a great country, is because people founded it because they didn't want that religious persecution like they were having over in Europe. They came here, a lot of the people, to get away from that so they could
For
practice their religion
Right.
how they wanted.
Right.
And the biggest problem I see with people who no, but it's our God, so we're going to go ahead and push that into the public face, they don't understand that that's a slippery slope. Because
Right.
now you're the majority. Give it 50 years. Maybe
Right.
it'll be Muslims who are the majority.
Right.
Maybe it'll be Buddhists. You don't want Buddhists putting that up there.
Well,
Right.
like,
I don't
let's
even
put
know what
that
they
out-
would put up
let's
there.
put that out there, though, just to kind of clarify. Like,
Buddha we trust.
if that is what was put up there, you would see a lot of backlash, and everybody
yeah.
would say, there needs to be a separation of church and state if the city had in Allah we trust or
Right.
in Buddha we trust.
Right.
But because right now we're in a city, or that is a city, and this is a state in the Bible Belt, they kind of feel justified in saying in God we trust because they are the majority
Right.
at this time. But going back to what you said, we have that rule there of the separation of church and state to protect people so that you can believe or not believe whatever you want.
Exactly.
So you went to talk about it, and
Yeah.
it went great, and then you went home, and nothing else happened.
Right. If
Yeah?
only. Yeah.
So what
Not
happened?
quite.
Yeah,
so
tell
yeah,
us
I
about
went
it.
up there and I very calmly, respectfully spoke, and I explained that there are people in Wentzville who are opposed to this display, and that they had contacted me, but that they are afraid of speaking out, as I mentioned.
And there were people there that day protesting too, right?
Not that day. That
Not
was
that day?
2 weeks later.
That was 2 weeks later.
So
Okay.
on this particular day, I was the only one who went to speak about this at all.
I see.
Yeah, no one else did. And so, but yeah, I just got up and I calmly spoke, and I talked about how government represents everyone, and I talked about how there are people in Wentzville that are afraid to speak out publicly for fear of backlash and hostility and discrimination.
Right.
And anyway, so spoke. We're also, and the fact that I don't live there in Wentzville, let me just point out, does not matter. It is
No.
not relevant. They knew before I spoke that I was not a Wentzville resident and that I'm a Maryland Heights resident, and they allowed me to speak. They allow everybody to speak, so it didn't
Yeah,
even
your
matter.
freedom of speech doesn't go away just because you're not a resident of their county or their
Exactly.
city.
Constitutional
Yeah,
right as well.
right. So they have no rule against non-residents speaking, and they knew in advance I lived in Maryland Heights, and they knew in advance that I was going to speak about that in God We Trust display, and they allowed me. And so, so I spoke, and we're supposed to have 5 full minutes to speak. Everybody gets 5 minutes.
You get your 5 minutes.
And what happened was the mayor cut me off at 4 minutes and 35 seconds, and he says, "Your 5 minutes is up." And I didn't know that at the time that it was only 4:35.
He cut you
Later
off
I
early.
timed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, he wanted me to think 5 minutes was up, but it wasn't. So he says, "Your 5 minutes is up." And then,
Maybe their mayor just doesn't know how to count.
right.
tell
That's
time.
always a
I would not.
possibility.
I would not be surprised.
We can always assume ignorance,
I honestly would
It's
not.
definitely bliss.
but in
I
this
hear.
case, probably not.
Right,
No, he
right.
didn't want to hear it anymore. So continue.
Right. So yeah, he cuts me off and he says, "Your 5 minutes is up."
Yeah.
And, and I was going to sit back down, but then he responds to me, which they do not usually do after people speak, but he responds to me to tell me that what I said was just hearsay about the fact that there are residents in Wentzville who are opposed to this display of "In God We Trust."
That's
He
hearsay?
says it's quote
Wow.
unquote just hearsay because let it be known that those individuals aren't here tonight, and whenever Wentzville residents have a problem with something, they're more than happy to make their voices known to me. And so they're not here tonight. So that's just hearsay. So he was dismissing me. And so I
Right.
responded. I said, "Are you calling me a liar?" I said, I just told you why they're not here. It's because they fear discrimination and hostility and
Right.
backlash.
Right.
Like this.
Right.
Like what's happening
What's currently happening?
Exactly.
It does
So-
happen.
So he
He
accuses
literally
me,
backlashed immediately.
Exactly. So he
Yeah.
accuses me of lying. He says it's just hearsay. He doesn't, accept what I said. And so as I'm responding, then he says, "Well, I'm going to have you removed from this meeting." And anyway, so then I walked.
What was his reason? Did he give one?
He did not give one. He did not give one. So then I walked to go sit back down, and there is a video that shows that I did sit back down, and I'm calm and I'm quiet at that point. And he has the police officers, 2 police officers come, grab me by the arm, and take me out. And the whole thing is on video, you know,
That's
and you
great.
can go to on YouTube, Sally Hunt, or youtube.com/Sally Hunt Atheist. You know, and you can see my speech is on the video. You have the cops taking me out on video, and you see. And so the thing is,
there's the clear discrimination, right?
Completely. I mean, it's
like,
funny.
no, you're not allowed to speak. And, even if you're peaceful, because you believe what you believe, you're not allowed in this institution.
Right.
Exactly. And it's funny because he proved everything I said right. Like the
Immediately.
people who fear this intimidation, hostility, backlash, like he's proving that they have a reason to.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah,
And
there's the
I
evidence.
also want to point out that after I spoke, after I left, I watched on video later. It was 2 speakers after me. This woman spoke, and she got up there, and first she spoke against me and in support of the In God We Trust display. And she was given extra time. So she talked for probably about 2 minutes against me and in support of In God We Trust. And then he gave her an extra full 5 minutes in addition to all of that. So talk about obviously being,
Wait, how much
biased
extra
and
time?
discrimination.
So he didn't start her
gave-
time until she went to her actual
He started
topic.
the 5 minutes
He let her
after
berate her.
after she talked against me and in support of In God We Trust.
Free
Yes.
reign to berate Sally. That's what he did.
Right.
And then now your time starts with your real topic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Extra time for her. So talk
That's
about
crazy.
clearly promoting a preference for some people over others based on their viewpoints, based on their religion or lack of religion. So that's the opposite of what government, is supposed to be doing. So what happened after this happened, the ACLU found out about it, and they contacted me and they said, we want to file a lawsuit on your behalf because this is clearly a violation of your free speech rights.
That was before you went on
So-
Fox News.
Yeah, it was right. It was like right around the same time.
Yeah.
After the meeting. Yeah, it was
Okay.
before. It was before.
It was
then.
before
But
that.
then
Okay.
they
But
contacted
then
me.
Fox News brought you on, so
So,
we
yeah.
can segue into
Yeah.
that. So you got
So
what was the-
were you in the Wentzville City Hall twice, or was?
So then
Okay.
after that initial meeting that I just talked about, where I was taken out by the cops, that got on the news.
Yeah.
So then that started getting attention. And so then at the following Wentzville meeting, 2 weeks later, it was can I cuss? Am I allowed to cuss?
Why not? We try to avoid
Okay, I was
it.
going to say S show. Yeah.
Yeah, you can say shit.
I can
It's a
say
shit
that.
show.
Okay,
It's
shit
yeah.
show.
I want it to be family friendly.
Yeah.
I want
Right,
kids
right.
to be able to listen.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
But it was just crazy. 2 weeks later, like lots and lots and lots of right-wing Christian theocrats. And to be clear, I do not think they represent all Christians. Like
No.
there are a lot of Christians who
Yeah, a lot of
support the
Christians are
separation
inclusive.
of,
Oh, yeah.
separation of church and state. Yeah.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and so,
Plenty.
but these are specific people who think that they speak for all Christians.
And they want a theocratic government. They
Exactly.
want government to represent
And they
their
do.
religion.
They spend a lot of
Exactly.
time trying to put their values into public policy,
yeah.
which isn't good for
Exactly.
the whole. Like going back to sex education, some of those religious values aren't great for people who don't fit into that religious value system. They're actually terrible and super shaming.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like they have churches and they have private, Christian schools, and they have, it's not like they're not allowed to promote their beliefs.
Yeah.
They can do all of that. They have their full freedom of religion. This is about government, and it's,
Right.
That's
Yeah.
different.
And protecting
Government-
everyone's rights.
Exactly. So government has to be neutral and secular, free from any religious preference whatsoever.
Right.
But so anyway, so 2 weeks later at the following meeting is when it was like all of these Christian right-wing theocrats show up and they're all holding these signs that say, I support In God We Trust, or we support In God We Trust.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people. And they were very, very negative, hostile toward me. Like they were booing me, and several
Really?
of my friends
The
showed
protesters
up as well.
weren't polite.
Right. Super.
Never.
So much animosity. I mean, it was
Baba.
just. Yeah.
So inappropriate.
I know. I wanted to
was
go
amazing.
hoity-toity for a moment.
It was really amazing. And then, so yeah, I had there were maybe 8 friends of mine, 8 or 9 allies who spoke against the display. And then there were a bunch of these Christian theocratic types who spoke in support of In God We Trust.
Sure.
And they they clearly talked about Christianity and they had the Bible. I mean, it was just abundantly clear that it's about Christianity and that it's about religion, which is unconstitutional.
Right.
So that got even more media attention. And then that's when Fox News contacted me, was after that meeting.
And then you agreed to be on Fox News.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I don't like them that much. So I don't think I would ever do that. Yeah, you're very brave to go on there. I was like, I was very surprised to see you on there. How do you think that went? Did you like it? Were they respectful?
Right. Well, no.
We know. We saw
No,
them.
they weren't.
I mean, definitely not. But I did not expect them to be. I mean, I know.
I felt she was very dismissive. It was
Laura Ingraham.
It was Laura Ingraham.
Yeah.
But I actually felt like you did hold your own very well. You were trying to state your points, and you weren't being disrespectful. Although there was one time, not you were disrespectful, but that. What was Laura Ingraham says? Stop yelling or screaming.
You don't have to scream.
You don't have to scream, Sally.
Sally was talking just like this,
Yeah.
like talking
Normal
with her
tone of
your
voice.
normal passionate self, and I laughed to myself. I was like, wait a second, there's no screaming happening. There's
Oh,
just a difference of opinion.
That made me mad. Like she was trying to get you to yell. That's
She
what
was.
she
I
was.
think
She was
she
trying
was
to
trying
get
to
you.
poke ya.
She was trying to poke the
Poke the bear.
bear.
Well,
no.
this is always what happens. I'm very used to these tactics from people like Laura Ingraham, like from the far right Christian theocratic types. It's constantly being dismissive, engaging in personal attacks, and attempting to derail the conversation. Because if you keep the conversation on the facts that I'm bringing forward, on the actual issue,
Then they have no stand.
then they exactly
And it really is
lose.
clearly unconstitutional.
So they have to make it about me, and they try to dismiss me as, oh, you're just screaming, and you're
Attack
this
your
crazy
character.
emotional woman, and
Yep.
attack
Oh, and
my
there's
character.
definitely
Yeah.
like female-focused things
Completely.
too. Like
Oh, yeah.
you're yelling, you're an irate woman, or you're
Yes.
emotional. Like there's different tactics people use to basically squash women. They may squash the way you look, for example, which is not a common thing they do for men. But like, oh, you don't look good in those pants.
How
whatever,
dare you?
President.
I look sexy in these
Yeah.
pants.
No, you look handsome. You're adorable.
You were
but
looking
I'm
right
saying
at me.
It's a very specific thing they do to women.
And
to
my
attack
voice.
our
I've gotten a lot
character,
of
your voice.
criticisms about my voice, like as
Why?
if
The
I
way you
care.
look.
Sorry if you don't like my voice. That's your problem. Yeah, you don't like how I look. Your problem. Like focus on the words that I'm speaking about these issues. They do that all the time.
So this is something that I think, like I'm really speaking out a lot about because I think I really would like people to have just reasonable conversations. Now, I'm a therapist, so maybe that's just me.
Maybe I'm crazy, but I don't want people to murder each other.
Like, I talk to people of a variety of values all the time, every day. I've had people all across the spectrum, and I can sit and listen to people's values and help people make decisions. And I think that government should be able to do this too. We should find ways to be able to listen to each other and come up with either bipartisan laws or laws that are just looking at the whole of like facts, like for sex education. What is actually helpful for the kids? Not what we believe or value, but like what does the research say?
Right.
And I struggle with this, that like our culture has become so
Polar.
volatile
Very
and
polar.
and we can't even
And
listen to each
that's
other.
the problem, Angela.
That is the problem.
You're a moderate. And moderates
Oh,
don't
how
get
dare you.
involved. The reality is people like Sally get involved, who are
We call you a bull in a china shop, just so you know. That is what we
atheist.
call
I'm fine with that.
And she's
you
a
have
bull
to
in
be, I think.
right.
It's a-
And the
You do
reality
get
is you
shit
need
done.
it. But the other side has the same thing. Like they have people who
Yeah.
are very passionate, and you're a
Right.
moderate, Angela.
I
So
am a
you
moderate, so
can
I do
talk
want to
both
have
sides.
reasonable conversations and listen
Sure.
to people. I care about people.
But some people are unreasonable.
Well,
And
so
that's
what
why
do
you went on
do?
Fox News to meet all the unreasonable
well,
people.
you have to call it out when they're being unreasonable. I feel like you have to say so.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing is I keep seeing this where if you call people out on what they're actually doing with their words, they act like that is an insult and an attack. For example, if you talk about misogyny or racism, like when their words are misogynistic and racist, for example,
Right.
then
my
they're
goodness.
like, you're attacking me. How dare you call me a misogynist? How dare you call me a racist? Like, I'm not talking about you as a person. You can change. I'm talking about your words.
Right.
Well, the perfect example, one of your posts on Facebook, so I remember this so clearly because it was a very beautiful dog. But like they posted
dog?
your
Oh,
face
yeah.
with this beautiful like sheep. It was actually a very beautiful
Like an Afghan
dog.
hound.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
and he was like, "This is you." And so right away, misogynistic to
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
compare you to a dog. But she had such a perfect response. She's like, "Well, thank you. That's a beautiful.
It's a beautiful,
beautiful
dog.
dog.
If
Thank
I'm compared
you.
to that, then fine."
Yeah.
you know?
Afghan hounds are gorgeous dogs.
It
like,
was a gorgeous
whatever.
dog.
Oh yeah, we're big fans
They're
of dogs.
much
around
Worst
here.
dogs I could be compared to.
But it's an
Yeah.
example of that
Like a
misogyny of
poodle.
like you have your words don't mean anything. You're a dog. It's cutting down your
Right.
character, cutting
Right.
doand you as a woman, and it is misogynistic. But if you were to call him a misogynist, he's like, "Oh, you're attacking me. How could you?"
Right. Well, and I think that those types of individuals are used to those words actually having an impact. Unfortunately, like many girls and women will be deeply personally
Right.
affected, and
You're
it will
actu-
silence
It
them.
will
And
silence
they'll stop
them.
talking.
You actually you let it bounce off you.
Yeah.
You seem
I have
to be
no
really
idea
good
how
at
you do that.
Angela
I
was
care
actually,
way too much about what people
So,
think.
Angela was actually talking about this before the show. Is she was saying like you get a lot of hate.
Yeah.
She gets a
mail.
lot
Yeah.
of hate,
and that's
comments.
an example of one of them.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah,
Like,
how in
do
the
you-
world?
Yeah, I
How do
mean-
you not let it affect you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so used to that. I just expose it. I like to just expose people. For
Oh yeah, I
their
see you
words.
repost it.
Yes, I like
because
to
they
do-
like
You're like,
they
"Check
message
out
you
this
privately
thing."
something really racist and all this stuff, and they don't
Yeah.
expect it to be out there in the public. And it's like,
Yeah.
here you go. Now your mom gets to see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you have to do that. You just have to expose people for their views and their words. And, that's just it. And that's the thing is like people can change at any point in time. It's different to talk about somebody's words and the impact of their words, the harm caused by their words. Like, I'm not insulting someone based on their sexual orientation or their gender or their gender identity or their race or
Right.
ethnicity or
Or their
whatever.
religion.
Or their religion. That's the thing. It's like it's 100%. Like sometimes people don't understand that and they'll think I'm attacking Christians or whatever. But like I said before, it's about the separation of church and state. It's about understanding that we are all equals. Like atheists, we are not inferior to you, to anyone. And it's about that equality. So it's always about your views and your beliefs and believing some people are inferior and that others are superior and stuff like that.
And a lot of times
So-
they'll try to hide it behind humor. Like they'll
Yeah.
say, "Oh, it was a
just
joke. It was
joking."
just joke. It was
Yeah.
like it was a racist joke." And it's like
Yeah.
the reality
It's
is like
it's painful.
there's something they call in comedy. It's called punching down. It's like you
Yes,
shouldn't
yes.
punch down. That means where you're up at a higher status and somebody who's lower status in the public eye, like a minority of
Yeah,
some sort,
a marginalized
is
person,
making
yeah.
them the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
It's called punching down,
Yes.
which is never good. Like
Right.
it's going to be a racist joke or a misogynist
Like, what's the
joke.
reason you found that joke funny? Like,
Right.
let's talk about that.
Right.
Here's
Yeah.
just a way to figure that one out. If you in any way say, "I don't mean to be offensive. I don't mean to be," you're about to be very terrible,
Right.
and just stop the sentence.
And
Right.
and you can have
So you know,
and
guys,
a lot of
don't do
comedians
it.
actually like will joke about race, but they do it in a way that actually points out the terrible ways that people are racist. That's actually the
Right,
good
right.
way of doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Not just being a racist.
Pointing out the bigger picture of social, like the
Right.
way people treat one
It's a
another.
commentary
Yeah.
on racism itself, not
Right.
being a racist. in the joke.
Exactly.
Well, and I want to
Right.
point out something you said earlier that's really important for like what the state is supposed to be accomplishing. So you mentioned do no harm. The job of the state in terms of laws and policy is to make sure that we're protecting each other, or protecting ourselves from each other.
Yeah.
The reality is that humanity is violent, it's greedy, we do terrible things at times, and we can be good people too, don't get me wrong, but
No,
humanity
I disagree with that.
I'm just saying humanity can sometimes be terrible.
Yeah.
And so the laws are there to protect us essentially from each other, from
Right.
harming one another, so that we have freedom to basically live our lives however
And-
we want.
And it's not that people are terrible, it's that they make terrible mistakes.
People
they make
can.
terrible decisions and
Yeah.
they're sometimes ignorant. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people.
Nobody-
They're just
yeah.
doing bad things. And
It's
they
just
can change,
sometimes
like
we
you
do
were
bad
saying.
things. Like think of just speeding. Okay, a person who's speeding is not a bad person
Right.
ultimately, but when you speed, you do put people around you at risk.
Right.
And so why we have those laws is to protect the people from a speeder who could potentially hit them or
Right.
cause an accident. It has
Right.
nothing to do with your morals as a person.
Which is
Right,
why
right,
we don't want
right.
a theocratic government.
Yeah.
Because then the power is in a hand of somebody who's taking direction from their religion. We
Yeah,
don't want
it's
that.
not about that. It's about the impact we're
And that-
having on
historically,
society
that's
and
been
each
a
other.
bad thing.
Right. Right.
Like you get genocides in the name of God, you get wars in the name of God. It's like, yeah, let's
Or
keep that
many
out.
gods, really, because it's not just.
Well, when
in-
I say God, I mean gods. Like,
Okay.
I just think it's interesting. I have heard so many people say that they think, a lot of Christian theocratic types have said that they think we have freedom of religion.
Not
but
freedom
not
from
freedom
religion.
from religion. I keep hearing this, and it is so ridiculous because there is no religious freedom unless you have the full freedom to leave your religion at any point in time and have no religion. So if you're not free to do that, There is absolutely no freedom whatsoever.
Right.
And it seems like these individuals, these Christian theocratic types, they believe that religious freedom only means for them.
Right.
And they believe it's the freedom to oppress others and to force their own religious beliefs on everyone else.
Right.
Well, they feel justified by it because
Yes.
their value system supports it.
Yes, unfortunately so. And they're being emboldened by the government, which is promoting their religion. And that's the thing. And our original motto of the United States was E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. And that was a unifying message. And at the time of the founding of this nation, that was our nation's motto. And I do want to put a plug in for the original motto project, because it's an organization, and I'm a part of this organization as well. And the whole point of the original motto project is to go back to the original motto of E pluribus unum.
Because they changed it.
So, changed it in the 50s to In God We Trust.
And they also added in the 50s in the pledge.
Under
they added
God.
under
Yep,
God. Like that was not a
That
part of the
wasn't
original.
there.
And it was
pledge.
during the Cold War to promote that we are better than those godless commies.
Right.
And it was the whole point was to say that if you don't believe in God, that you're inferior.
That's why atheists are always called communists.
Yes.
Yeah, they tie it to
I didn't
communism.
know that.
People
Learn
equate
things
the
every
two.
day.
But-
But
Yes,
actually,
yeah.
like Russia is very like conservative. They have a lot of
Right,
Christians there. It's
right.
just so confusing.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
the Orthodox Church.
Oh yeah, they have lots of that. Okay, so
just interesting. Go on.
that's a very interesting story, but we are talking about sex.
Okay,
on
we'll
this
hit
podcast.
sex
so,
now.
So we're going to shift away from the atheism and all the religious stuff and talk a little bit about sex. So one of the things I saw on your page was a question that a man asked you. Why would a woman who is getting raped and or sexually assaulted not say no when a man has forced himself on her without first getting her consent?
Good question.
Why would a woman? So let's say a woman's here, a man's here, and he's reaching over, and it doesn't even have to be like sexual assault. It could be just like putting his arm around her and grabbing her. So it's an aggressive move. But why would she not say no and push away?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I say to that question is that the premise of the question is about victim blaming. Like you should not be focusing on the woman's behavior.
Sure.
It's about that the aggression, the doing, touching someone sexually or engaging in a sex act when you have not gotten the full, clear, enthusiastic consent of that other person.
And I want to make
is
it
not
very,
okay.
I want to make it very clear. I am opposed to rape. That is a very controversial statement.
Everybody's opposed to rape.
But the reason I'm asking it actually is not to victim blame or anything. I think it's important for people to understand.
For
People
sure.
understand why would a woman not say no?
I can give
Why would
cultural
she not,
context
Why would
to
she
it.
not push back?
So
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a little cultural context. So actually, women from childhood are raised to somewhat have a little bit of a fear of the word no.
Yes,
Like actually,
yes.
like because
You're taught
of the
to
way.
submit.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're taught to submit. We're taught to be a nice girl. We're taught that, like, actually, we get a lot of backlash for saying no or for being assertive. Like,
Yes.
even in
Or for
childhood,
being a woman
like,
that speaks
if
out.
you are assertive,
Yes.
you're called
Yes. You
know
a
those?
B word, a
Yes.
bitch, and like, and the reality is, so like, we're basically shaped out of it throughout our childhood, and like, so, but what happens then is they'll kind of feel nervous and they don't know what to do. And there are some men who act out violently
Yes.
even when you say
When you say no, yeah.
And so like, it's almost like a means, it's kind of like a trauma response. I
It
think
is.
we've all
Yeah.
developed where
And
we're
some
just,
women may have previously been assaulted. So when
Some
they're-
will.
They
Right.
could be triggering just to be
It can
touched.
be a scary
can be
situation.
scary.
You
Sure.
don't know. Like there are a lot of men who don't deal well with rejection,
Sure.
and a lot of women have maybe
and
seen
to be
that.
fair, everybody struggles with rejection, but go
Yeah.
on.
Sure, but it tends to be more that the response is from men. It can be more violent,
violent.
violent, degrading, and this comes from patriarchy and toxic masculinity, where it's like this male entitlement. It's this social phenomenon where
Sure.
it's like you owe me sex, and I'm horny right now, and
Oh,
if
they
I,
owe you?
So a lot of men actually
Yeah.
really do. They feel entitled to women's bodies.
Interesting.
That's why this is a social patriarchal problem, misogynistic problem. And yeah, you make a great point, Angela. It's like women are raised, they're socialized
Yeah.
to be submissive and to be like people pleasers.
Yeah.
We're
We're not allowed to have opinions at times, depending on how we were raised.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Right. Like you want to make your man happy. You want to make other people happy. Don't speak up. Don't say no.
Yeah. So that's one piece of it. But then like in the other piece, I don't think men are trying to be misogynist. I know there are some who have been raised that way, but the reality is a lot of men do care about women and they don't sometimes realize that they're pushing this boundary. Like here's a perfect example. I was talking recently to a guy who was talking about, like when I bring a woman up to my room, isn't it understood that that's what's happening is that we're going to have sex.
Right.
So there's this cultural norm that like, no, like if you're coming up, I'm getting some. But the reality is she may be coming up to your room to just talk to you and to maybe have a tea or maybe like see if things can get close. Maybe she just wants to make out, but she doesn't want to have sex. And the fact is that all or nothing thinking essentially makes women feel like when they're wanting to say no or wanting to set a boundary, they don't feel safe. So they even create that mentality in their own head.
It makes them feel like they're somehow breaking a rule because they're supposed to have, just because you invite me up to their, you're not agreeing to sex when somebody invites you up to their apartment.
And the thing is, it's there's a lot of layers to this. Like
it's challenging.
Men need to stop assuming consent. They need to stop thinking it's implied, and it is incumbent upon them to make sure before they touch someone sexually or engage in a sex act that the other person does consent. And it's not just men, women as well. I mean,
women
it's just more of a problem with men, but everybody, no one ever can touch a person sexually without their consent or engage in a sex act without getting that consent. But it's like, but also, to continue to answer your question, like there are other reasons as well why a woman may not specifically say no. Like she may freeze up in that moment. And that might be out of her control. Like it's a scary thing. Like a man starts touching your body sexually or penetrating you, and without your consent.
And you don't know what to do.
It throws you off.
You're
like,
maybe this will be over faster if I just,
don't move.
And if you put your arm around a woman and her only response is to freeze up, guess what?
That's a nonverbal
thing of saying, "Hey, I don't want you to touch me."
Well, this goes
not
back
enthusiastic
to
consent.
if you try to kiss them and they don't kiss you back.
But this goes back to why we need comprehensive sex education. People aren't having really long conversations about what does consent look like, and there can be both verbal and nonverbal consent, and that is an example of nonverbal not consenting. And so we have to I like what you're saying, enthusiastic consent, like yes, let's do this, I totally want to make out with you, let's make this happen.
There should be no doubt in your mind that this other person clearly consents, and if there is any amount of doubt and it's not clear whether they consent or not, you have to verbally ask them. Like that's not that difficult, just ask.
Like, hey, is this okay? And it can be sexy. Like I think people think it's like this business merger. It's like, okay, let's sign a contract and write everything out.
Would you like to copulate?
No, it doesn't have to be that. It can still be sexy and flirty. Do you like this? Is this okay? Do you want to do something different? Like I've had very sexy times with consent, and it gives me permission to feel free as a sexual person.
Completely. And it can someone verbalizing that they want you and they want to do these things. If you're attracted to them, that is
hot
as
hell. It's hot as hell.
Yeah. But even if I think it does. I mean, it doesn't have to be verbal. Is the thing. Like it's just slow down. Like don't just reach. Don't just do. Don't just act. Like just slow it down and like kind of like look in their eyes. Like are they smiling? Are they nodding? Like what we
on the same page? We're doing this.
Are they reciprocating? Are they leaning in? But if like I said, if there's any doubt, then you definitely need to ask. It's like not that difficult. Like the only reason to be opposed to this is if you want to be able to rape and sexually assault people if you feel like doing it.
And the reality is like I think a lot of guys need sex ed because of this, because they aren't taught how to ask for consent. They aren't taught how to talk to a woman. Like, never at a single point in my childhood was I ever sat down and said, this is what you say to a woman. This is how you ask for consent. This is how you say, hey, I like you. Like
this
nobody
is how
ever
you
teaches
flirt.
you that
this
stuff.
is how you get to that level.
And to be clear, like, of course, we don't want to be heteronormative as well. And of course, not everybody's heterosexual. And, definitely like men rape and sexually assault men as well and boys. And that's a common problem within the gay community as well. And, I mean, again, anybody can rape or sexually assault people. Women can as well.
Women can as well.
Women can as well.
Overwhelmingly more common that men do this to women, and I think that's the thing. Or to men.
It's generally male or the perpetrators.
Well, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen the other way. And I appreciate that you're trying to be inclusive because that's usually the first argument. Is like, well, women rape men too, and
very rarely they do. Yes,
it is true, and I think it doesn't matter who you are. If a boundary is set and you're crossing it, you are committing a sexual assault, and we all need need to be trained in how to understand and identify those boundaries, but then how to deeply respect those boundaries so we can be great lovers.
Right, definitely. I mean, that's the thing is that comprehensive sex ed, it empowers everyone to be able to openly communicate. You can communicate about your own boundaries, you know, but then you also are able to respect other people's boundaries. And that's why we're doing such a disservice to kids by not talking to them openly and honestly about sex and about consent and about bodily autonomy. And that it does empower people to say no strongly and to verbalize their own boundaries, but it definitely makes everybody respect other people's boundaries as well. It's horrible that we're not
and the reality
doing
is
this, teaching it to
people
everybody.
want sex to be a happy, loving,
it's fun when
passionate
everybody's
thing.
into it.
Yes.
Like, you don't want that. I don't think anybody wants it. And if you do, go get help. Like, really,
Yeah.
that's a
Right,
problem.
for sure.
Like, there are therapists that work with perpetrators.
It should be
Look 'em up.
pleasurable for all parties involved, you know, absolutely.
Right.
Well, put
That's
it on
what
the
good
other
sex
side of
is.
the spectrum, actually. Like, so in my couples counseling, I'll get a lot of married couples who are in sexless marriages, and that's their biggest complaint is that you're not into this, and it makes me feel very sad because most people aren't perpetrators. Most people are just people who want to have consensual sex with people they love. But even in marriage, because desire can start to die off, then they start doing this sex for it's like your requirement.
work. It's a job.
It's this chore sex, and it's damaging to their self-esteem. Like the men who are in that experience hate that because nobody wants to, of the normal people or whatever we want to say, nobody wants non-consensual sex. We want sex where everybody's involved and enjoying it because it is hot. It makes it the most wonderful experience.
Right. And you need communication for
Yeah.
that and trust.
So speaking of
Absolutely.
this same topic, you actually posted on Facebook about penetration. You said there's a difference between penetrating and getting penetrated. When done without consent, the reality is that one is far more violating than the other. This is true. Please stop with the false equivalencies. So why is there a false equivalency there? Like, I don't understand that. Like, I kind of disagree with you there. Like, if somebody's raped, whether you're male, female, straight, bisexual, transgender, you're being violated.
Definitely.
So why is there seems to be a little bit of a victim pissing contest going on there?
So that
like it feels like
on an no, so that's not what it is. But
hilarious.
like I'm more of a victim than you are.
right,
That's-
I don't know.
not at all. But I mean, so
Sure.
on an individual level, like I've always been abundantly clear. Like I said before, it's never ever okay to touch anyone sexually without their consent. It's
Right.
never ever okay
Yeah,
to
we all agree with
engage
that.
in any
Yeah.
sex act without their consent. So regardless of who the person is or what gender they are, being penetrated, never okay without consent.
Never okay.
So so that's on an individual level. But so what that comes from, because people kept asking me, well, if two people are wasted drunk,
Oh, I remember those posts.
And
yeah,
they-
we've had this discussion
but
before.
so this is where it comes from. They kept asking me if two people are wasted drunk and they have sex.
Can either of them consent?
Essentially, all these people
Yeah.
kept telling me it's a wash. Like basically, you can't see that the woman was raped because the man was wasted drunk too. He could have been raped too. So my thing about it,
and he could have.
So he
there-
could have technically, but
And I
it's
actually
about
know a
He
man
has
into
a
that
friend-
situation
He has
who
a
was.
friend who that
Okay, I'm
happened.
not going to say who it was.
But,
but
but again,
So it can happen and it does happen.
can happen. It very rarely does
It is
happen.
less common.
So it's kind of like when people say all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter. Like, yes, it is true that all lives do matter. But when we say Black Lives Matter, there's a reason why. And there's a systemic problem that we're referencing and we're talking about that needs to be dealt with. So to me, it's a similar thing. Like, so these questions kept being asked when I was talking about the systemic problem of misogyny and women's bodies being under attack and being raped and sexually assaulted as
Right.
often as they are.
Right.
Which is often, very often.
But something that is an issue with that is like if both people are drunk, how do you tell who is the perpetrator and who's the victim?
Well, who says that they're the victim? That's how. So if two people are, I mean, this is the thing is like, if two people are wasted drunk and they have sex and nobody says it was rape, we don't have a problem. Like, I mean, it still could be a problem if the person, like, technically, you should really never have sex with a wasted drunk
I don't
person.
think you ever should.
I really.
So-
there are some
Right.
countries that are putting out laws that they're saying really you can't consent beyond a
think-
certain amount
And
of
that's the
I
alcohol.
thing
don't
is you
think
can't.
I don't
Right,
think you
you
should
can't.
have your first sexual encounter with another person, meaning the first time you have sex with that person, intoxicated in any way, because that is the time when you need to give consent. in a very clear way.
Right.
The second time, once you're in a relationship, it's a little easier. You can get drunk and have sex together because
because maybe you both are in that space. But no, like that's
But if
the
it's a
point,
new person in your life, you don't want to do that.
Well, and there's very clear ways we can kind of identify this, right? So if somebody's unconscious, they can't consent. That's a blackout thing.
Hold on, I need to write that down.
If
Well,
somebody's
a lot
unconscious-
of men do need to write that down because that is it's a
No,
common
even if she
problem.
said yes before, if she's unconscious, there is no consent.
Yes.
No.
If we're way too drunk, you maybe both shouldn't have sex. But honestly, like just on a side note, sober sex is the best, guys. You're missing out if the only way that you have sex is drunk. But on a flip side, when you do drink and have sex, you have more sexual problems anyways, like more ED and delayed ejaculation on both sides for the female and the male. So like really, you're just missing out. Why not drink a little less and have sober dates?
Yeah.
But like specifically my thing with, and to be clear, like I'm talking sloshed drunk, like
Right.
Yeah.
like slurring your speech, can barely stand up, cannot walk in a straight
9
line.
glasses of wine
Like,
in. Yeah.
I really don't think that's
depends
a
on the
good time to consent.
But yeah, as opposed to buzz, like that's not what I'm talking about. But
Right.
it is a common problem where wasted drunk women are viewed by men as an opportunity for them to take advantage and to go penetrate, and so that is rape, that is sexual assault, and it's like it happens all the time. Like this is incredibly common. I mean, if you talk to women, most women have stories like in college at some point
Where they were
at a
date
party.
raped.
Yes, yeah, where somebody, once they see them wasted drunk and they're like, instead of saying let's help this woman, let's keep her safe, it's let's go
take advantage of her.
of her. So this is a very, very common problem. There's really not a systemic common problem of women finding drunk men to go rape.
Sure.
Like it's just so that is what I was referencing is like stop pretending as though there's an equivalency between what men deal with and what women deal with. Like women have there's an actual constant risk and threat.
But the way you're phrasing it makes it sound invalidating to those victims. Those men who have been raped, they've been raped. And I understand there's a systemic difference of frequency. It happens a lot more to women. And there's less men who are raped, but that doesn't mean that those victims weren't still raped.
Well, that
of
goes
course
back
not.
to,
So there is
our original point from before. I maybe we should talk about this. So, like, I think it's hard for people when like we go into these deep things because I think there's this part of us that wants to be universal. Like, no, if anybody's raped, everybody's important. We want to cover everybody. It reminds me of that, like Black Lives Matter to like all lives matter. Like, the hard thing is when we're trying to debate this stuff. Yes, everybody matters. All of you, all boundaries matter. Every person should be respected and should be able to consent. And it's hard because I think then when we talk about this, like, okay, the frequency is more with females than males, then it almost sometimes feels to men maybe like an attack. Like, well, what about us? Why don't we count? And I'm trying to, I guess, put out there, it's not meant to be an attack. It's just meant to kind of describe just how invasive and intense this is for females, that it is. Like, culturally, we're sex shamed from childhood. We're not allowed to be assertive. We struggle to say no because we've been taught throughout that it's not okay. And
because of that, you're assaulted.
And because of that,
basis.
we're at higher risk.
Right.
And that's all we're saying is that we're at higher risk. And we need, as a society, to recognize that the way to change things is to take ownership for the fact that as a male at times, you have basically a little bit more power in this world as a result of the way that the country is structured and that patriarchy. When people bring up the term patriarchy, that's what it's about. It's this basically a society that we've set up where we allow men to get away with things.
Yes, yeah.
Men are in the privileged position.
And I know many men who aren't acting like that. You're one of them. I love my husband because he really does. You really care about women. And there are quite a few that are listening right now that are like, I'm not one of those men.
Right.
And so I want the people listening to understand that it's not an attack on every man. It's just when this happens, we have to find ways to change the system. You have to look at it honestly to change it.
Yeah, definitely. And if
people are using that argument as a reason to not discuss rape, then 100% that is bullshit.
And they are. And
that becomes minutia.
The thing.
That's the big problem.
The people who keep trying to ask this question, they want to muddy the waters and they want to give reasons to not believe
they're creating a
rape
bunny trail.
victims.
Right.
They are.
So that's the thing.
It's a minutia thing.
I see this constantly where like if a woman says, I was wasted drunk, I was too drunk to consent, and this man raped me. If she says that, you need to believe her. Like it is incredibly rare that women lie about getting raped,
Right.
and so this is
it's actually reported the same. false reports are the same for other crimes as they are for rape. So it does happen,
that's
but
cool.
other crimes are falsely reported just as common, which is very rare. It's very rare. It's like
very
2%
rare.
or
It does
less.
happen, but it's more rare than...
There's
And
no
it sucks.
process. Like, why would you put yourself through all of that?
And here's the thing. It sucks so much. It has to suck so much for that very small percentage of men who do get falsely accused.
Yeah.
Of course.
Because there's
Yeah.
no
It
way
is.
to defend against it. There's no way to prove that the other person was consenting or that you weren't raping them.
Yeah.
It's all hearsay.
Well, I will say that in this very small amount of cases where we know that there have been false allegations, the story tends to unravel.
Yeah, it does.
And these women who have lied about it, this incredibly small amount,
Very,
like
very
they tend to
small.
be exposed. Like the story unravels. It's usually, that's the thing, is that people take this incredibly minor, small amount of times that this happens, and they act like, well, therefore, let's stop believing when
Well, yeah,
women
they use
come
it to
forward.
do an absolute and say, well, let's assume every woman is actually guilty until she's proven
Right.
innocent.
Right.
'Cause
No,
there's so many people
Right.
who don't like report effectively. Let's just not believe her, and
Right.
that's the problem. Is that
Well, it's actually the man is the accused. He is innocent until proven guilty, but he has to. They have to prove his guilt, and he has to try.
I mean,
to prove
in
his
a court
innocence.
of law.
In a court of law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, there's always due process. Nobody's just going to go to prison.
Right.
Right. Of course.
Yeah, but I think what I was saying with that is those little comments, these minutia comments, are ways to kind of do that victim
They
blaming
derail
thing
it.
where they're derailing it. They're
Absolutely.
trying to say, oh, this women always do this, and these are
Yeah.
the ways that they're not good. You know, like, and it makes
No.
it so hard when somebody
Nobody
has been
wants
raped
the
to
reality,
get help.
Nobody
Right.
wants to be officially known as a victim of rape or a victim
Nobody
of
does.
any
It's
crime
so
that
shameful.
involves
Humiliating.
sex
So
or
shameful.
People
anything
judge
like that.
you. They blame you. They say, you're a slut. You shouldn't have been there.
Or
You
they
shouldn't
say,
have been
you're
have
ruining
drank
that
so
young
much."
man's life. Stuff like
Right.
that. It's like, well, he fucking raped me. How about that?
Right. It's very
That ruins
serious.
your
my
life.
life. It lasts
forward.
for years.
People go to... therapists have entire jobs because of people like that, because
Right.
they have to deal with those emotional problems the
Those
rest of their
scars
life.
are there.
And that's the thing is, like, when people try to come up with reasons to not believe the victims that come forward, they're keeping other victims silent. Like, that's the reason
Yeah.
that it is so hard to come forward, is because there are all of these people who are ready to pounce and judge you and say you're lying and that, you're a this and you're a that and your real agenda is this and that. And it just keeps people silent. It makes it so hard to actually get the courage to finally speak up.
yeah.
So you recently posted about teaching sex ed at Soulard. How'd that go?
At the Soulard School, it went very well. Well, I didn't teach sex ed.
Okay.
I taught a parent workshop.
Okay.
So it was just designed to talk to the parents so that they would be more sex positive types of parents. More able to openly, honestly communicate about sex and sexuality with their kids.
Okay.
Because their kids are about to have sex ed at their school.
I
So
see.
the Soulard School hired me to talk to the parents.
Oh, that's so.
really
I'm
cool.
a parent. What
Yeah.
would you tell me when I'm talking to Mike? What would you tell listeners
Yeah.
about when they're talking to their kids about sex?
My main point is just always you want to normalize sex and sexuality. You want to be open and honest and factual and straightforward. We have to set the tone for our kids that, there is nothing wrong with them having questions. There's nothing wrong with these conversations. Like, this is healthy. This is a part of humanity. It is, you have to think ahead to, as your child grows up, what do you want for them as an adult? What qualities would you want them to bring to all of their sexual experiences? I asked these parents that.
Right.
I said, I know it's weird to
smart.
think of your child as an adult and having sex one day, but one day
They will.
be. So what would you want them to bring to those sexual experiences?
We totally agree. Every decision we make with our daughter is like, how are we raising her into an adult?
Yeah,
and
we're
what
raising an
values are
adult.
we teaching her?
Yeah.
I always think into that space because I think sometimes people will let kids get away with little things because they're like, oh, they're just a kid. Like, this is a weird experience about it, but like letting your kid cheat on a game. Okay. I know this is something sometimes people do because they're like, they're young and it's not a big deal. But the reality is, if you're trying to raise them to be a decent adult,
to be fair.
To be fair, like letting them cheat is teaching them that it's okay to cheat in life in different ways. But like if we're sticking to the rules, then they're learning to be good sports, even if they win or lose, then that's okay. And that part of life is getting comfortable with those things. And so I personally believe in that 100%.
Yeah. Well, and the thing when it comes to sex and sexuality, there is so much for us to actively combat with our kids. Like this society is very sex negative, very puritanical, very sexually repressed, and there are all these mixed messages because then there's so much over sexualization at the same time.
And at the same time, if you don't fall into that perfect gap of being straight, white, and
male.
Right, totally.
Whatever. There's no perfection here. Everybody's
then any other
butterfly.
sexual preference or anything kinky, anything if you're gay or bisexual or transgender, if you're a different gender than they're used to, all of a sudden, that's not acceptable, and they shame you.
Yes, and that's part of what I talked about as well. Part of being a sex positive parent is that you are accepting. It's all about consent. But I mean, otherwise we're not judging, we're not shaming, we're normalizing. Like, sexual orientation, all sexual orientations are totally healthy. We don't judge, we don't shame. People choose, they can decide for themselves what their sexual orientation is. And gender identity, that we're not telling, boys must be like this, they must look this way, act this way, play with these toys, etc. Girls must, whatever. It's same thing where we are letting kids be autonomous individuals, and they can express themselves in a way that they're comfortable. I talked a lot about that, like trying to understand that we're not in control of our kids. Like, we're their parents and we have certain rules and expectations, but they are their own autonomous individuals, and we have to respect that.
Yeah, the reality is at a certain age, if you are that very authoritarian, I'm going to control my kid, you're going to do exactly what I want. At a certain age, they grow up. They become teenagers, and they understand, you can't tell me what to do. You can tell me that, but as long as I hide it from you, I can do what I want.
Well,
and that's a problem because if your kid is hiding something from you, you don't get to have a say in it at all. That means if somebody is gay and they're hiding it from you because you're not accepting of that, then they're going to do that all on their own and not tell you anything about it. And you can't have any input about safe sex and consent and all these different topics that you do need to talk to your kid about.
Right.
Yeah.
Your own opinions of morality, quote unquote, like when it comes to sex and sexuality and gender identity, all of this stuff. Like, ultimately, I mean, it's one thing to express your own opinion, but you have to understand that this is an autonomous human being who will be who they are, and you're really hurting your relationship with them if you're shaming them for who they are and you're judging them and you're trying to control them.
Trying to control is the big part of it.
Yeah.
Like when you were talking about authoritarian parents, it's interesting. So that authoritarian style sort of works for the younger children because you can at least pick them up and put them where you want them to be. But as they get older, it's actually
As they get older, they get heavier, and it's a lot harder to pick them up and move them.
In teenage,
Let me tell you, my daughter's 3. She's getting heavy.
In the teenage years, it becomes a huge problem. And when I see couples that are working through that parenting thing, if they're too authoritarian and too control-oriented, their kids and them are having huge fights, like sometimes physically violent fights, because they're like, you're not going to touch me anymore. You're not going to tell me what to do. You're not my dad.
You're not my dad.
So to speak. And so I agree. I think it's so important to but in order to do that, even to raise somebody to be autonomous, you actually have to respect them as a separate person, as having their own values, and allow your kid to actually have different values if that means that they grow up and become...
Because they're gonna, no matter what. They're gonna have different opinions.
That's the thing is and I talked about this as well when I did this parent workshop. We want to raise critical thinkers. So whatever your values are as a parent, kids are more likely to actually follow values if the kids themselves have decided for themselves that they believe that and that those are their values. Like if you just tell somebody these are the values that you must follow, like it's not going to mean that much because at some point, like they're going to realize, wait, are those my values? They're going to figure it out for themselves. Like we all did that.
They're going to eventually hear other people's opinions.
Right.
And some people will just try to isolate their kids. They'll homeschool them. They'll keep them in a bubble. And the reality is those kids turned up really messed up because they don't have anything else coming in.
Well, to be fair, not all of them do. I've met plenty of homeschooled kids who are very neat people.
If the parents isolate them
But if
entirely.
they are authoritarian, controlling, and isolating
there can be
from
some challenges.
everybody else.
No, I'm not saying all homeschooling is terrible.
I just I have some homeschool people. I understand.
People need to see other cultures. They need to see other opinions. They need to see other things in their life so they can kind of get a good grasp of reality.
Thinkers.
Yeah, like you were saying. So, like, discern for yourself. What does this mean to you? What do you believe this value? Do you not? Why? What's important to you? I know plenty of people who actually don't even know why they believe what they believe. They believe things, and they've been taught these things, but have they ever actually critically thought about why they believe what they believe? Why is this important? And so, when you raise kids like that, then they become stronger. They're able to make safer decisions in life. They're empowered, and I think it's super important.
So I have a little question. This is kind of steering it to a different topic.
Sure.
Why is so much of religion about sex? And it has to do with sexuality, meaning you're bisexual or gay. It has to do with sex before marriage. They focus on reproductive rights. There's so much. Why are so many people who are religious so focused on sex?
Misogyny, control. I feel like a lot of it stems from wanting to control other people, but patriarchy. Hence, that these gender roles, there are these strict, rigid gender roles, especially within fundamentalist religion, fundamentalist conservative religion. And if
but why do they focus on that so much? Why? What is
control? I think it came.
You think it's about control
from wanting to control the masses.
Control where they put their dick, and you can control their wallet.
Perhaps.
I mean, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think generally
that was mostly a joke.
No, I mean because a lot of it is about money as well, right? And getting that money.
Let me break this down.
It's all about that tithe money.
No, I've really thought a lot about this one, and so part of the reason why I am such a proponent, like I'm against. What's the word against? Opponent to fear-based and shame-based teachings of any kind is that they come from a sense of trying to control the other person. Yeah. So like you're either trying to shame them back into the fold, or you're trying to scare them like you're going to hell. That is a version of fear-based training where it's like if you're not exactly like this, you're physically at harm. And what it does to people is it's almost like it's a tactic to manipulate people to stay and to confine and conform, essentially. But the crazy thing is that people so what it ends up doing is creating two extremes. When people are raised in these very, very fundamentalist religions, they either get brainwashed, so to speak, and join the fold and are always there, or they starkly go the opposite way because they realize this is nothing like me and I'm not comfortable with this, and then
they have the other extreme,
and then there can't be this middle ground, and in those particular religions there's no allowance for I believe some of this, but here's who I am. And this is only that specific religion.
It's only people who are very fundamental.
There are other religions that are very inclusive.
Even among Christians.
Even among Christians.
We're not talking about everybody when we talk about this.
No, and there are plenty of religions that are not trying to use that fear and shame-based teaching.
Definitely.
But it is very harmful, and these are toxic emotions that are essentially used to control people.
Definitely.
And actually you posted another thing about politics that actually really goes along with this topic. It's a quote by Lyndon Johnson. He was a president, if you don't know who he was. He said, "If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't know you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him someone to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you." And that's really it.
Yeah.
It's about if you can get somebody to be afraid of somebody, like you were saying, or to hate another group, you can really get them on your side. Because people love to be pissed off about something. Yeah. Whether it's about another race or another religion, people love to be angry. And then while they're doing that, you can pick their pocket, as he said.
Meanwhile, the wealthiest Wall Street execs, corporate execs, wealthiest elites are getting rich off of all of us, have rigged the system, owned the politicians to get all of the tax breaks in their favor, and we're all getting screwed while people are blaming people of color.
They blame the other groups.
Feminists.
Yeah. Nobody blames
LGBT,
the politicians.
right.
Nobody blames the politicians for all the problems and ills in our society. They blame other groups. they say, oh, it's the Christians, or no, it's the atheists, or it's black people. It's like, no, it's not. It's the power structure that we've set up, and it has problems. Every government does have problems.
Oh, and by the way, I was going to say, like at the at these Board of Aldermen meetings in Wentzville, and then also in St. Peter's. St. Peter's has a huge "In God We Trust" sign as well. So I have spoken there as well, and there have been several people who get up and speak, the Christian theocratic right-wing types, who several times have said the atheists have an agenda to destroy America.
Which, by the way, we're not that organized.
Wait, so
right.
Hold on. Why do you want to destroy America, Sally?
Great question. I mean, that's the thing. It's funny because it's the exact opposite. When you actually are patriotic and you love America, you want it to be better, and so you want to promote equality of everyone.
We want the system to succeed.
Yeah, and you're and I'm the one promoting the U.S. Constitution. These are people that are opposed to the Constitution.
Yeah.
I mean,
they want to go against the law.
It's just absurd.
Come on. How do you feel you're in the right? Like, that's the law.
But that's kind of like what you were saying too, like with the quote from Lyndon Johnson. It's like, pick somebody to blame, some other group that you blame, while the rich, are.
So wait, so you're saying we shouldn't blame people and like we should take personal responsibility for our choices?
I know, right? They're
unheard of.
They're the ones that say. I know, it is ironic, right? Yeah.
Well, I don't think people realize the ways that they make these leaps in logic. Essentially, like if you actually they say, I believe in the Constitution. Well, the Constitution very clearly states we need a separation of church and state.
Right.
So, like, it's always funny to me to kind of call people out on their own values, to get them to really think about, like, wait, where are you actually not in line with what you're saying?
Most of them haven't read the Constitution.
I know.
Most of them haven't read the Bible. The reality is, like, they are not very...
Well, they pick and choose from the Constitution, cherry picking, just like they do with the Bible.
Right.
Like, they love that Second Amendment, but they don't care about the First. It's pretty interesting. Yes.
People.
You guys.
So something else you wrote about recently. This one kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, what is this? So you said, talk about your emotional baggage. Talk about your childhood and your parents. Talk about any abuse, bullying, ostracizing, shaming, judgment, and hardship you've experienced. It is affecting you today. You cannot ignore it. You will never be able to get past it until you're open and honest about it all. Don't be afraid to release it. It was not your fault. No stigma, no shame. Own your past and feel empowered to move forward as a better, stronger person. What's that about?
Well,
so do you think people should be public? You think people should be public about their traumas?
I mean, I'm not necessarily saying it has to be public in that post. Talk to somebody.
Right. Don't hide it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't
that's
bury
what I was wondering.
Yeah. So it doesn't have, like, I talk publicly about, like, I feel like I don't expect everybody to be like me and put everything out there, whether it's on Facebook or in a blog post or whatever.
And we have some guests that come on and talk about sexual trauma, and not everybody wants to do that. Like, that is not what you're saying.
Not what I'm saying.
Okay.
But definitely be open and honest, first and foremost, with yourself.
Yeah.
And be open and honest with close friends, partners, with a counselor. Like, sit down, find a good counselor that you trust, and have intensive therapy. Like, right, like.
And if you need counseling, you can catch Angela.
You can catch Angela at www.therapistsinstlouis.com.
There you go. Yeah.
Plugged.
Yes.
Plugged.
But it's just more and more, I keep seeing this, where people will act out and will cause harm to other people. They will abuse other people. They will degrade other people. And this viciousness and this meanness and disrespect and degradation, dehumanizing of other people, the abuse, it stems from that these people are not being open and honest with their own stuff, their emotional baggage. Yes, like I mean, we all have stuff. Everyone like to does. Varying degrees, but I just feel like we have to deal with that. And I just keep seeing it over and over again, where people want to portray themselves to society, to other people, as something, and they want to like look perfect, and then they judge other people.
Well, you know, I can point that out even in my client work. So, like, sometimes the most angry men that I'll meet on the couch are the scaredest and the loneliest and feel the most rejected.
Yeah.
That's where all anger comes from.
Well,
fear.
it is. And so, you know, like, the approach I take with clients like this is to be very loving and supportive of them, and to point out that I understand that they're scared and lonely. And it's amazing to me how that anger just starts to dissolve when they realize, oh my God, this isn't actually anger. This is something underneath that I've been been holding on to that I need to let go of. And so I think that's why I just think it's so important to have these peaceful conversations too, as a moderate, because I feel like even those people who are acting out like that, they have these traumas. They're scared to death. And using fear or shame back at them doesn't help either. You know, we have to kind of meet people where they're at and help them to grow.
Well,
So I think one of the biggest problems with people not being honest and dealing with their problems is that perpetrators, for example, a lot of people who are molested as children, a lot of times they pay it forward. And that is the shittiest part, because the reality is, like, you yourself were abused. You were totally corrupted. It ruined your life. Deal with it and you can be a better person.
Right.
But if you tuck it away and don't deal with it, the reality is, like, they use that as an excuse for why they're doing that. The reality is they're messed up and they need help.
And that's the thing, is there's never an excuse.
No.
And it's like, I wish this country would stop stigmatizing mental health treatment and shaming people for talking openly and honestly about their issues, especially men. Like, there's like this, stigma where, oh my God, men have to be tough and strong. You can't talk about your feelings.
They're not allowed to be anything but angry and calm. And it's harmful to them.
Right. And it's weird because, like, what you were just talking about like those men in your office and stuff, it's on an individual level in a counseling situation. Obviously, it's just full empathy, compassion, but it's hard because those types of men who have had all of these issues, we never want to give them an excuse to then promote racism, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, I feel like we have to call it out. Like, it's not okay to treat people this way and to speak about people this way. You're not, you're putting other people down to make yourself feel better. And we see what you're doing. And I'm like talking to those people, like, instead of harming other people, deal with your stuff. Like, you have emotional baggage. Maybe you've been abused. Maybe you've been shamed and whatever it may be.
Sure.
And maybe you have mommy issues. That's a common thing.
There's all sorts of stuff.
And daddy issues.
But that's the thing, is,
Daddy
as a humanist,
like,
as a humanist, like, that's what humanism is each person, each human being, has worth, and so value. I feel like it has value, and so maybe they've been through stuff, but that's not to excuse their harmful, oppressive behavior against other people. Deal with that. Go get help.
Deal with your
talk
issues,
about your
because
stuff.
the reality is you will be a better person.
Yes.
And you won't hurt other people in the way that you were hurt.
Yes.
That's
Don't pay it forward.
Learn
to work on yourself so you can be a better person. And really, I just wish I could have them all, because I'm pretty good at helping.
I wish you could.
I'm just like, how about everybody just come see me? I'll do it.
Like
that'll solve all the world's problems. Everybody just needs to get therapy from Angela.
It really would. But that's the thing, is I have noticed.
She's also really good at being humble.
Oh, I kick the shit out of being humble.
Yeah. So,
That's awesome.
If you need help, she's the humblest therapist.
I'm the humblest humble person in all of Humbleville.
Oh, she went Trump.
Now you sound like Trump.
Yeah, I know, I'm totally
She's totally trumping.
It's fun. It's
I
fun.
know, that's hilarious. But like, I was just going to say one more thing about this, is like, I have noticed more and more, and this is kind of what prompted me to post that about talking about your emotional baggage and being open and honest. I have noticed more and more that it seems like the people who hate me the most are the ones who are terrified of being open and honest, like with comprehensive sex ed. Like, they're like, don't talk about this stuff. Like, bury it.
It's like those people who are like vehemently opposed to gay rights are also like shameful that they're gay, and then they come out later. It's like it's the unresolved issues they're dealing with. And the thing is, why shame is so toxic is, instead of being able to accept who you are as a person and live out loud and proud, you are this bad person because they were raised in this system where they're not allowed to be gay. And so then they develop this huge shame. And shame is so toxic.
They're angry at themselves.
It makes people act out in the worst ways. Like, my hardest clients are ones who have been so shamed that they can't even like act like a normal person sexually. You're sexual people. I just want everybody to know this. It's normal. And there's nothing shameful about it. But when shame is associated with sex, we get acting out in ways that are just like monstrous.
Yeah, rape, frauderism, like public.
Weird
when they start
stuff.
hurting other people.
That is when people, because they're so like, they're like, oh my God,
we have to be open and honest. Stop being scared to talk about our feelings and about facts and about, human sexuality. It's
And that's
just
why
be
it's so important
honest.
for parents to be
Yeah.
able to be talking to their kids about this stuff.
Yes,
Because,
absolutely.
in a normalizing way, not in
And
a
we have to
shaming
talk
way.
about oppression and racism and misogyny and homophobia, transphobia, like all of these things going on around us, all of this negative stuff, the prejudice and the discrimination, all this crap going on around us. We have to be honest about that as well, so we can actively combat it. Like, we can't just ignore it and pretend like
No.
everything's fine.
That never works.
Ignorance is
No.
bliss, they say.
It's
but
going on whether we admit it or not. We have
Yeah.
to combat it.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, when Trump got elected, all of a sudden I stopped watching the news because I couldn't handle it. And that's the reality. It's like, nope, nothing else exists outside my house.
It's a lot to deal with.
But I've
get
gotten
that.
back into reading the news more
got
now.
back.
But I used to read it every day, all day. Like, I would read multiple articles.
I had a lot of people crying that week in my
Yeah.
office.
Oh, yeah. Trump depression. It's a real thing.
It was a
Oh,
real
yeah.
thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, we've covered a lot. I mean,
We have. Anything else you want to cover?
I think we've covered
I think
most.
we're
Why don't we
good.
do a few plugs? Are there any final plugs you want to put for what you're doing? And
Yeah, well, I have Facebook.com/Passionate Atheist. So that's specifically my public page about the separation of church and state, about atheism, the Passionate Atheist, Sally Hunt. And if you want to connect with me on Facebook, Sally Buxbaum Hunt, Buxbaum as well. And you can contact me through Angela. I'm sure they could get in
Yep.
touch with you. But
She's on our friends list. You can grab her
yeah.
there. Yep.
But yeah, and I'm trying. And that's the thing, is that I'm going to go back to school and get my PhD, and I'm looking to get into sex therapy. So at some point, I will be, also following in your footsteps.
That's awesome.
good for you.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, but I'm not quite there yet. Just have to
Sure.
start that in the fall.
And then going forward, if you want therapy, it's www.therapist in St. Louis. And as some of you already know, I have a book out right now. It's called Helping Couples Overcome Infidelity. It's very good for both couples and therapists to read, to kind of learn what that treatment looks like. It's available on Amazon.
Yep.
Oh, I have a
Good.
Twitter too. Should I mention that?
Yeah,
You
go ahead.
mention your Twitter.
And Instagram. It's the same. Sally B Hunt. Sally
Sally
B
B. Hunt.
Hunt. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There we
Twitter,
go.
Instagram. Yeah.
Look her up, people. Awesome. So this has been the About Sex podcast. We've been talking with Sally Hunt, the Passionate Atheist. Be sure to add us on Facebook, review us on iTunes, and send us your questions to aboutsexpodcast@gmail.com. I'm Joshua Skirtu.
And I'm Angela Skirtu. Stay kinky, St. Louis.
Yay.